I think it's always good for entrepreneurs to keep an eye out on what the competitors are doing. So not a fear necessarily, but I think you need to be aware of where other companies are positioning themselves, and so to be a little bit paranoid about that is actually a good thing, I think, for startup founders. So I think that's one thing that we always try to see if our product is differentiated enough and has enough defensibility in the market when we go talk to customers. So I think that's probably what I would say is the most important area where we continue to see focus.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents, trademarks, and other business-related things. And today we have another great guest, and it's one of our Where They At Now 6 months after we originally talked with them. And it's Karthik, and I always worry I'm going to say the name right.
Karthik Rao. Yep.
Sorry, it's as good as I could do. But if you remember, so Karthik, is it Karthik? Karthik. I'm just gonna have to stop saying your name so I don't slaughter it anymore. But was with Flick and was doing that and continues to do it, and kind of that's where we left off of building that business or that journey that led up to where he's at today. And now we're gonna hear a little bit kind of about the last 6 months and how you've had to adjust some equipment and do a bit of rebranding, and how you've done some bit of spin-offs and how you've done it now an official launch and had that going, and kind of what all that journey's been, and kind of what the shutdown has been, and cut different customers and pivots and all those good things. So with that much as an introduction, welcome back onto the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. It's good to talk again. It's nice to reconnect and see where we're at. It's like you said, it's been a few months since we last spoke, at least on this forum. So it's nice to be able to see where we're at.
Absolutely. So now take us back in time to kind of last time we spoke, and just kind of for everybody that's either new to the podcast or getting reacquainted, so to speak, give us kind of where you left off about 6 months ago, where you're at, and then kind of tell us a little bit about how the last 6 months have gone for you.
Yeah, I mean, just to give a little bit of background, I started a company called Flick a few years ago, and the idea was to work on a technology area called edge computing. So for those that probably are not that familiar, so we're all used to putting stuff in the cloud these days, right, in our personal lives. So, pictures, emails, etc. So we just upload everything to the cloud, and just sort of magically works.
Somehow it's magic. I don't know where it goes or how it works, but it works.
So industries are no different. I mean, they started doing that 10 or so years back. They started putting all of their operational data in the cloud. So that's been going well for many years, but it has its sort of limitations. So edge computing essentially is taking a subset of that storage and processing power and putting that in a local sort of compute sensor in our case, but in sort of in our day-to-day lives. Just imagine if you had a mobile phone which had all those apps running, so you didn't have to actually connect to the internet to do everything that we typically do. So that's sort of the technology area where we were innovating. So the idea is you put a little bit of intelligence into each sensor. The sensor attaches itself to a piece of industrial equipment, and you don't really have to connect to the internet for it to work. So that's basically what we were working on. We've been selling that solution for a few years, but the pandemic really has been sort of a forcing function for many of us, I think. So we had to rethink how we do business, how we make it easy for companies to use our solutions. So it's been an interesting journey over the last 6 months.
So now, and that was a perfect overview kind of where you were at and kind of where things left off. And now you kind of hinted at it, which is, last 6 months or since we last talked, you've now had COVID, you've had to pivot and adjust. So kind of what were the things that you kind of ran into that caused you to pivot? And then how did you react? Because that can always be a scary thing, right? Especially if you launch with one thing, it's going well. And then, where the limbo that a lot of companies have been in is, well, we had a good model, and once COVID opens back up or once things open back up, then we'll go back to it. And then it was kind of the goalpost kept moving of, well, it's going to be in 2 months or 6 months. And now it's a year and now it's 2 years. And so it kind of makes it hard. So how did you guys what was the difficulty you guys faced and how did you pivot or adjust to it?
Yeah, when we spoke in the summer last year, I mean, we were sort of in the middle of the pandemic even then, and we started seeing signs of certain businesses not really picking up as much as we had hoped. And that's nothing new. I think all of us have sort of gone through that phase now, and we're seeing certain parts of the customer base starting to come back. So what we noticed was the way that we were selling our solution required all of our sales guys and engineers to actually participate in sort of a consultative sales approach, right? Where you're trying to work with the customer to figure out what the issue is, and you help them install these sensors in the field. And all of that was just not possible because we were just obviously not able to travel and visit these sites. So we had to figure out another way to sell our solution. So that really was the initial impetus for us to start looking inward and trying to figure out how to make it really easy, or as easy as possible for customers to install stuff on their own. Right? So we couldn't travel, so we had to actually ship these sensors in a box, and the customers had to actually go and install it on their own. So the idea was to just simplify the product. So we started there. And then what followed was sort of setting up all the infrastructure that we need to actually be able to sell this new product. So the old way of selling it just wasn't working, and we just had to pivot and try to figure out a better way to sell our solution. So that really was how it got started. And then as we dug a little bit deeper.
Maybe just one quick question on that. So because, as you're saying, okay, we were doing in-person installations where a lot of it was face-to-face and in person, and COVID kind of makes that much more difficult. You're saying we have to adjust and pivot. How did you, I guess, one, arrive at the conclusion, okay, we simply can't keep doing it? Was it, money and sales are drying up and you had to figure out how to survive it or to adjust? Or was it more of, hey, this is an opportunity if we're going to adjust, not just for the short term, but let's make this more sustainable for long term? So how did you kind of arrive at the conclusion that, hey, we need to do something different here and let's take this as an opportunity?
Yeah, it was both really, Devin. I mean, we obviously had sales drying up. We had a lot of oil and gas and energy customers at the time, and gas prices dropped. A lot of the R&D spend went away. So that was the Q2 of last year was a little bit difficult in the way that sort of it evolved, and wasn't really clear when that phase would end. So internally for us, we had to figure out other markets to sell into. So we started looking at other opportunities. And we're pretty opportunistic in the way that we were going after customers. So we were doing okay as a company, but still we sort of realized that the old way of selling it just wasn't working. And obviously, as we all got used to working remotely, we're just starting to wonder why it's not possible for companies to monitor these equipment remotely. Right? There should be no technical reason why we can't do that. If you and I can do business on Zoom, it should be possible for companies to monitor remote assets. There's no reason to actually put somebody in a truck and send them once a month to go monitor a pipeline. So that really was the problem that we were trying to solve. So what we came up with was a really sleek, simple solution. Just to draw a parallel, I mean, it's like sort of attaching a fitness tracker to your wrist, right? It has to be that simple. So you just put a smart sensor. That's what it looks like. Basically a tiny box that you attach to a piece of asset, and just simple as that. 20 seconds to install. And we want to make it really easy for companies to do that on their own.
So now, how long did it take you to actually implement the changes, right? So you have this, hey, we've got to make this simple. We've got to make it, so that we're not having to have people on site or otherwise doing that. And so you kind of have that as an idea, and you kind of give us an idea of what a solution you arrived at. But how long did that take you to kind of roll out or implement or figure out how to make that pivot?
Yeah, we had the basics of that solution already implemented in the past. So we knew exactly what to do. It was just a question of getting the engineering team to focus on that. So we had to create a prototype that we could go take to customers and try to validate that in the market. So that took about 2 or 3 months to come up with something that we could actually show customers. Then in August, we started promoting this to our internal contacts that we had with customers. September was when we first got some revenues from this new product line. So we knew that that it had some legs, and then Q4 started to grow quite nicely. Then that's when we decided on a business level to make that pivot. It seemed like it could stand on its own and needed to be launched under a new brand. So we created a brand called Stoke, and we formally launched that about a month ago, and onwards and upwards from there.
So you're kind of running now almost two businesses or two product lines in parallel. It sounds like, not to put words in your mouth, but you still have the original model, or hey, we'll come out, we'll be a bit more invasive, or we'll do it for you, so to speak. And then we also have the more simplified model of hey, we'll give you virtual or digital training as to how to do it, make it a simple product, and allow you to do it yourself. So sounds kind of like based on the pivot, you're now kind of running those two different companies in parallel.
No, most of the employees have already moved over to Stoke. So Stoke is really what's scaling right now, and obviously we had to make that decision, and it was a tough one to try and figure out where to focus. But luckily for us, I mean, Q4 and Q1 so far have been really good quarters. Sales seem to be going in the right direction. We're scaling nicely. So most of the attention now is with Stoke. So there's still some old customer relationships that we have with Flick. So we're sort of converting them to Stoke customers, and then we'll continue moving forward with Stoke.
So I think you've now answered the question, because the next follow-up question is going to have is kind of now moving over to Stoke, adjusting the business model, pivoting. What if you could, going back in time, and not possible, but we'll play a game anyway. If you could take the model you have today, which was kind of at least necessitated or forced based on COVID, you made that adjustment versus the original model. If you had the option, would you go back to the original model? Do you like the new model better? Or kind of, if you could choose which path, if COVID had never come along and you had the options to go either way, which way would you go?
No, I think what we ended up with at Stoke is probably the right thing to do. I think we eventually would have worked on that particular arc and tried to make the product as simple as possible. Right? But as I was saying earlier, it's sort of a forcing function. You had to make decisions quickly. And so sort of the pandemic really forced us to look inward and try to decide what was the best course of action for us. So I think in the end, I mean, regardless of the circumstances, I think we ended up with the right result. And the sales over the last few months have really proved that it was the right move on our part to do that. And so yeah, looking back, I mean, I think if we had made this decision a few years ago, I suppose, I mean, that would have been the right thing to do at that point.
No, and it's interesting because once you get a product, especially when you get a product up and running, the company's profitable, you tend to go or continue down the same route, whether or not it's the best route or the one that makes the most sense, but it's the one that you're comfortable and that's what you've launched. And kind of reflecting on one of the businesses I ran previously, was we were going down one route, and it wasn't a bad route, but we had what was a frivolous lawsuit that was filed against us that took the company in a different direction. It was a year of my life I wish I could get back, and it wasn't a fun experience. But at the end of that, it also amidst all that forced us to step back and said, if we could, the route that we were going down, the lawsuit was a little bit of a catalyst, kind of like COVID, and it was like, if we could go back to the route we were doing, would we do that? Or now that we had to step back, we rethought the business and how we're doing it, what was a better path? And it actually led to a much more fruitful and better path in the long run, even though it's sometimes those painful things that kind of cause you to give pause or have to go through it and not enjoy it, but in the end, it comes out to be better. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, my thoughts exactly. I think once things are going okay and you sort of get used to working in a certain way and sort of promoting your product in a certain way, there's a lot of inertia in the company, right? Everyone's used to doing things in a way that they're used to, and it's just really difficult to sort of change tack, and it's a difficult decision, no doubt. So we had plenty of internal debate on what to do, and so, as I said, finally I think we ended up where we should have been a couple of years ago.
No, it makes complete sense. So now, as we, looking for the next kind of 6 to 12 months, kind of with the pivots going on, with having to adjust to things, where do you see that going? Kind of that 6 to 12 months, 12 months out.
Yeah, the plan is to continue scaling our business now. So we need to build the team around the core team that we already have in place. So we've got a solid team now of engineers and people doing sales and in management. So we've got a good core group. So the plan is to raise a little bit of funding, add some more R&D in sales and business development, and try to scale the business. So that's the plan for the rest of the year. And hopefully, I mean, with with the vaccine rollout and the worst is sort of behind us, and things will get better. And as things get back to normal, we hope to scale the business along with that.
All right. No, I think that's now with both with things behind you and also with an updated or differentiated business model. I think it sounds like a great path forward. So, well, as we wrap up, and I always, normally on a normal podcast, I have my last two questions. I always switch that up a bit for the where are you at now kind of episode. So the question I'll ask you is, kind of now that you've gone along your journey, both the original journey in the last 6 months and dealing with COVID and everything else, as an entrepreneur, what's your one biggest fear and how do you overcome it?
I think it's always good for entrepreneurs to keep an eye out on what the competitors are doing. So not a fear necessarily, but I think you need to be aware of where other companies are positioning themselves, and so to be a little bit paranoid about that is actually a good thing, I think, for startup founders. So I think that's one thing that we always try to see if our product is differentiated enough and has enough defensibility in the market when we go talk to customers. So I think that's probably what I would say is the most important area where we continue to stay focused.
No, and I think it's a good point. And one of the things, love them, hate them, or indifferent to him. Mark Cuban, he always talks about you should be waking up each day or thinking about how your competitor is going to kick your butt, or he says it's some variation of that. But you should always be worried about what your competitor is doing, but not just fear in the sense that it stops you or can't move forward, but more of now gives you motivation for, hey, we need to stay ahead of the competition. We need to always be anticipating them and making sure that we're doing things better than them and cheaper or faster or whatever the competitive edge, but to always anticipating what they're doing. So I think that that's a good, fear, quote unquote, to learn from, and also how to react to it. So, well, once again, as we're wrapping up, if people want to find out more about your business, about, Stoke, or previously about Flick, what you guys are doing, they want to be a customer, a client, they want to be an investor, they want to be an employee, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out and find out more?
Yeah, just check out our website. I think that's probably a good place to start. So it's stoke.global, and it tells you a little bit about what we do, how to order some of our equipment, and certainly how to get in touch with us. So
all right. Well, I definitely. Go ahead.
No, I was just finishing up saying, I'd recommend sort of people start there, and you can reach me on LinkedIn as well. I'm fairly active there. So I look forward to hearing from whoever is interested in finding out more about Stoke.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, find out more, and definitely is an exciting and a great company that is going places, so to speak. Well, with that, we'll wrap up the podcast. Thank you again for being on. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell, whether it's 6 months your 6-month journey or your original journey, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the podcast. We'd love to share your journey. If you are also a listener, one, make sure to click subscribe so you get a notification as all of our awesome episodes come out. And two, leave us a review so new people can find us so they can hear the awesome episodes as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, trademarks, or anything else with your business, reach out to us at Miller IP Law by going to strategymeeting.com. Thank you again for coming on. It was as much or more of a pleasure than the first time, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It was a pleasure reconnecting, and let's do it again sometime.
All right.